The trio sonata was originally written for two flutes, so that's the sonata on the concert. And the D major was written for viola da gamba and harpsichord. We are playing the trio with two violins instead of two flutes, and the D major with cello instead of gamba. So what was involved in adapting them? So over to you, Keiran, about the gamba versus cello.
Yeah, and these gamba sonatas, because we only have the 6 suites as cellist, we have always stolen the gamba sonatas because, the viola da gamba and cello are close enough in range. I mean, they go lower, and I don't know, in some ways it's easier to play higher on a gamba versus a baroque cello because just gut strings up high can get, it gets kind of iffy. And so what I did is I don't play the gamba. I really need to learn. That's actually my big project that I need to do. And I don't have a 5-string piccolo cello, which would be sort of the obvious, because gambas have 6 or 7 strings and a piccolo would have 5. And so it'd be kind of close. But I thought I had this cello that has been on loan to me from Christoph Landon in New York for a year. I should give it back. I keep trying to tell him he needs it back. But so I actually strung it up. There's a lot of evidence in Bologna that people were using. Well, first of all, people were just using all sorts of tunings in the early days of the cello. It was, the cello was not anything like it today. All sorts of sizes. They didn't even call it a cello for till later in the 1600s. And one tuning they used apparently was DADG. So it sounds like, and it's actually basically an octave below a violin. So it would be, yeah, that's right. So it's sort of like almost like a bass violin, someone might call it, or a 4-string piccolo. Who knows what it would be called? But this particular cello actually was made in Bologna in probably the end of the 1600s, early 1700s. So it's at least, it's young enough for Bach. And for the transcription, I didn't really have to do much. I mean, most of it, especially because it shares the same, that upper D string is the same as a gamba. And a lot of the writing is centered around that register. So it wasn't, there was, I guess, that one passage in the last movement that uses, some lower notes than what I have. But everything else I could play at pitch. It was way less awkward because you don't have to shift. I guess I should explain. A modern or a baroque cello would have, this would be your top note. The A string is usually your treble string, but then I have one more up here that's higher. So it eliminates, you don't need to shift up and down as much. You can just play sort of side to side, which makes my life a lot easier. And that's why I could learn it so fast, because I could just stay in first position the whole time. It's no problem. It's still very tricky, but
it sounded great. But yeah, the tricky part is, I don't know how you could read it, because you're just reading, every instinct in your mind and hand must be to go here when here doesn't work anymore.
Yes.
You have to go somewhere else.
I'm being honest that I have no idea. It should have been harder. It's usually much harder for me. Like when I play the Gabrieli, the G major sonata, I actually wrote out, I had to write it out so I didn't have to figure out which string, because that has that you tune the A string down to a G. It's just, and it's only a tiny bit different, but maybe if it's a little bit different, it's more confusing than just having this weird piccolo tuning. It makes it a little easier, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. But it's true. So, if the people listening have heard the word scordatura, that's what you were doing. It means it's tuned, out of tune. But usually when people play scordatura, it's written out so that they put their finger in what would be the normal spot, but it looks really strange because it looks like totally discordant music that makes
it just doesn't. Yeah.
So that's another kind of brain game, but I was impressed. Anyway, my notes were all exactly where they usually are. So,